Hey, everybody. Welcome to Daniel Davis Deep Dive Special Edition. And listen, this one is devoted to you, the viewer. We just wanted to make a special effort to come on here today and just talk a little bit about how appreciative we are of all you folks who are watching. We have grown this channel. We're barely 6 months old. We started in September of last year with literally zero, not a single subscriber. And we just rolled over 25,000 here recently. That's kind of a big marker. But actually, before we could even get up to do this show to put it on the air, we've added another 1,000. So we literally just before this show aired, we rolled over 26,000 and continuing to grow. And listen, I think part of the reason is because people out there are so hungry for the truth. And for somebody who's just willing to call things the way they are and tell you what's really going on and not insult your intelligence by giving you a line of BS or trying to cause you to believe something or try to force some kind of a mentality on you that maybe you don't want. And I think that's why you enjoy this show, this channel. And I can assure you, we've been in the same boat. We do the same thing. That's actually the reason why we formed this channel, Gary and I, who's behind the scenes there. You hear me talk about Gary all the time. This is a partnership that we have. He and I both feel very, very passionately about this channel, about bringing you the real stuff and being unintimidated and uncompromised, because I know some of the things we bring, some people don't like. And that's actually one of the things I've enjoyed about watching this channel is that, this army of people that we're forming here, the deep dive army, as I'm recently come to calling it, is that sometimes you guys actually debate among yourselves, even in the comments to the side. And I think that's great. This is not one of those channels where I just want one viewpoint and, you come to get the echo chamber and just get your ideas reinforced. We actually want to debate. We like that, to where people can come in and discuss with one another what they think. Some agree with this, they don't agree with that, and they argue and sometimes debate back and forth. And I think that's a healthy thing. Because we have guests on from time to time that some of you don't agree with, but we want different viewpoints to be seen, so that, because I'm a strong advocate and believer that if you hear more than one viewpoint, sometimes that can reinforce your position and say, yeah, I was right, exactly what I thought, because what this person is saying it reinforces my view or this information here. But there are other times, and I definitely am in this case, and that's why I have a diversity of different people on the show, is that sometimes they can provide information I didn't know and a point of view and a perspective that kind of changes things. And I think it is absolutely vital for a population, for an electorate, for an individual, certainly for leaders, to be able to say, all right, let's keep our minds open to other possibilities and other alternatives, because sometimes people have really good ideas. Sometimes people may have a lot of bad ideas, but they have one really good one. And if you just shut your ears and don't listen to anything someone says, that if you don't like one thing about them, then you lose out sometimes on getting some real nuggets of wisdom. And we have certainly had that. And look, we've even had some of our viewers here as guests on the show eventually, because they had such great ideas. I wanted to share them with you. We're actually going to have Ian Putnick from London come on again next week. You're going to see that on there. And we've engaged with some of you, others of you on here, and we've really enjoyed doing that as much as we can. And we're going to continue to do this because, you've probably seen some of the deep stories out of late, and some of the polls out that show that the American public in general, and really the Western world, is continuing to lose confidence and trust and faith in the news media. And look, this is something that shouldn't be happening. The news media is supposed to be that entity that brings you the truth and brings you the diversity of information, so that you can make sense of the world around you and get the real story, as opposed to the way it's kind of turned out to, which is kind of echo chambers. You can find those on the far right. You can those on that lean to the right, on the left, that are far to the left. I mean, you can find all of it, but they're all stovepipes. They don't have cross-pollination, so to speak. And I think that's bad for the country. And I think we're suffering because of that. Because the consequence that it happens, and we see it all too often, is that when you stay in your stovepipe, in whichever lane that you're in right there, you end up, feeling confidence in numbers in your side, and then hating the other side. It grows to first from dislike to then to hate, and then to viewing them as the enemy. Even, sometimes they're your next door neighbors. And I just think that's a really unhealthy thing to do. And that's why we sometimes call out those on the right, sometimes call out those on the left. And actually, we don't even call out so much as just say, people are saying this and it's inaccurate, and you need to know the truth. You deserve to know the truth, especially with issues like we talk about a lot here in recent days with the war in Afghanistan. I'm sorry, with the war in Russia and Ukraine, war between Russia and Ukraine, the war in Israel between Hamas and Israel, and the things that are going on in the Middle East, the things that are going on in Asia. You deserve to know what's going on. And when the White House says, hey, we're going to give a bunch of money to Ukraine, you deserve to know, where's that money coming from? What's it going to buy? What's it going to do? What's it going to produce? These are all questions that they owe you that they're not giving you. And we're going to continue to hold their feet to the fire by telling you what they're withholding from you, or telling you what maybe they give you like half the story and present it as the whole story. And we're saying, yeah, there's a whole chunk here they didn't give you. Or by the way, sometimes it's misinformation and what they told you is just flat out untrue. I know, hard to believe that sometimes happens. But yeah, we're going to call that stuff out too, no matter what it is, because folks, ultimately we're all in this together. And we're so grateful to be going down this journey with you. We are so grateful to you guys, and all you who have already, liked and subscribed to the channel and shared with some of your friends. We are so grateful to that. I don't take it for granted. And it does mean a lot to us, because that tells us that we need to keep going, that there is a thirst and a hunger out there for people who want to know the truth, whatever it is. And then they're willing to make up their own minds, whatever it is. They don't need me. You don't need me to tell you what to think. I'm just providing you information and evidence, and then you can reach whatever conclusion you want to. And I feel very strongly about that. That's how I am. I like to get information, and I don't want anybody telling me what to think. I want to be able to say what I think based on comprehensive information. And so we want to treat you with the same respect and honor that you can come up to your own conclusions, and you don't need me to tell you what to think. Listen, we are going to continue to stay unintimidated and uncompromised, and we're going to continue to bring you things that are happening. As a matter of fact, there is a speech that apparently at least was scheduled to start at the same time this video did here in France, in Paris, where Macron is going to be making some big policy statement of some sort. And we're really eager to find out what he's saying, because he's been talking a lot about possibly sending troops, French troops, into Ukraine. And he says, we need to not be afraid to do anything to Putin. We need to not be self-deterred, kind of thing. We're going to see what he's going to say today, because apparently it's a new policy he's going to announce, and it could have real ramifications for what happens in that war. We may even come back to you later this afternoon, depending on what he says and when that speech is over. So keep an eye out on that. And we're going to have, something tomorrow from an expert, Rebecca Koffler. We've had her on once before, and you're not going to want to miss that one, because it's Putin's play. She wrote this book, Putin's Playbook, where in the book, before all this stuff, before the Russia-Ukraine war happened, she actually predicted that that's actually what would happen. For various reasons, because she has spent years, she's I think a former CIA intel officer, and had spent a lot of years studying Putin, knows him inside and out, is really good at understanding how he thinks. And we're going to ask her to come and kind of give some commentary based on that speech that he gave yesterday, really, that was kind of, I think, in a preparation for Macron's speech today. And we're going to see how all that fuzzy. You're not going to want to miss that. Tune in that tomorrow. And we've got a lot of great guests for you next week, some others coming in from Europe as well. So we continue to give you that diversity of information. And again, just let me, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for joining our channel. Thank you for spending the time with us and sharing it with other people. It means a lot to us. At the end, as we conclude this segment here, though, I'm going to give you a piece of a show we did here recently to where I kind of told people a little bit about my background, because I mentioned a lot of times I've got 4 combat deployments, and and I had been to Desert Storm and Afghanistan twice, and Iraq as a military trainer, etc. We talked a little bit about that, so you can get a little bit more knowledgeable about who I am. We're going to replay that portion of the clip. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time. We keep having to have thousands upon thousands of American troops scattered throughout the world, especially throughout the Middle East, doing missions that have nothing to do with our national security. We dilute our own national security capacity, because while those troops are there, they're not training on high intensity warfare with Russia or with China, for example, if that should ever be necessary. Instead, they're basically sitting in the desert doing nothing, just waiting to see if a bomb's going to drop on them. It's the most egregious waste of our resources and unnecessary risk to our troops that can be imaginable. 3 already paid that price over a month ago in Jordan. But if you have listened to people like Jack Keane, these war firsters, they're going to say, no, keep them there forever. Don't ever bring them back. There's no militarily attainable objective. There's no end state involved. It's just keep our troops in the ground forever. But let's look at some of the exact things. Let's go back to the playbook. Were there, in fact, people who were saying all along that this was crazy? I actually wrote a piece in the Armed Forces Journal while I was still on active duty. I said that, look, this war is on the brink of failure. There are 7 things that stand in the way of success in Afghanistan. And I specifically wrote, absent a major change in the status quo that currently dominates in Afghanistan, the U.S.-led military effort there will fail to accomplish the president's objectives, and despite our best efforts to spin it otherwise, we will lose the war in Afghanistan. And certainly that's exactly what happened. Of course, you can't hide the fact that in August of 2021, full decade later, all the egregious waste of resources and everything else, it exactly turned out the way that Matt Ho and I and a handful of others said at the time would happen. What irked me enormously was at the same time that I was warning that there were very predictable reasons why our war would fail, you had people at the highest levels trying to convince you otherwise. One of the most famous was David Petraeus. The same year I wrote what you just saw here, he told the American people this.
In response to the threat posed by these extremists, ISAF forces and our Afghan partners are engaged in a campaign intended, above all, to prevent reestablishment of transnational extremist sanctuaries in Afghanistan, like the ones al-Qaeda enjoyed there when the Taliban ruled Afghanistan prior to 9/11. Meanwhile, the efforts to increase the size and capability of the Afghan National Army and police are also now on track, though there clearly is considerable work to be done in that critical area and to sustain the gains that have been made recently in recruiting and attrition. Even as we continue the effort to complete getting the inputs right, the actions taken over the last 18 months, which include tripling the U.S. force contribution and increasing similarly the U.S. civilian component, have enabled the initiation of new efforts in key areas in Afghanistan.
As it turned out, about 4 or 5 months later, after he made those statements, I deployed into Afghanistan as part of Petraeus' surge, a part of President Obama's surge of 30,000 troops, you may recall. At the time I saw that, I thought, wow, well, maybe I was wrong. Maybe things are getting better. Maybe that we're not going to lose the war after what I said. I said, well, I really thought that it was going to work that way for the practical reasons that were in that article, but maybe I was wrong. So I was going to be happy to be proven wrong, and in fact was eager to get to Afghanistan because I wanted to be part of whatever we were doing that was going to bring that war to an end, end the suffering for the Afghan people, and of course make it safe for the United States. But when I got there, I saw to my anger and frustration and disappointment that everything that Petraeus said was a lie. And I say a lie, and not just that his assessment was wrong, because with the information that he had it in his possession, he knew, he should have known anyway, that what he was saying was not going to work. That I don't know if he was just hoping that later on things would change. I can't get into his mind. I can tell you, though, absolutely for a fact that what he said was wrong. And in fact, the longer that I served on that 1-year deployment, the angrier and angrier I got, because I saw that American men were dying and having their limbs blown off and devastated for the rest of their life over a lie. And when I got back, I just couldn't do it. I couldn't stay silent. So I wrote another piece in the Armed Forces Journal that talked about the lies that were going on in Afghanistan. The New York Times picked it up, and then they ran this thing that called me a whistleblower, which I didn't actually like that title. I just said, no, I'm just telling the truth because I have to. There's no way about it. And I was interviewed shortly after that time, after that article came out, a number of media outlets, and I was asked why I did some of these things and what I thought. Here's how some of that interview went.
When you have a certain amount of information that you know things are a certain way, and then you convey them in public in a way that contradicts that, that's hard to get by with, to say that that's not intentional, or knowing that we're trying to make you think something that's not so. You know, if this was the 3rd or 4th or 5th year even of the war, then you could say, well, we need to continue being that optimistic and go. But when you see the same comments from 2004, especially about the Afghan National Security Forces, from 2004, these guys are increasingly taking the lead. They're, getting out there. They're gaining the support of their countrymen. Only in the 11th year, you still don't see physical evidence of that. I have frankly lost my confidence in the ability of some of the senior leadership of the Army to police itself. And based on what I had seen over an extended period of time, and then what I had definitely seen in Afghanistan, it was clear that just going, quote, through the chain of command was going to accomplish nothing. And so I believed the only chance that there was to actually get some kind of something to fix this situation to where we're just being honest about what's going on is it's going to take some external help. And that's why I went to Congress.
Now, to their credit, a number of congressmen, both in the House and in the Senate, Republicans and Democrats met with me, agreed with what I had said because they could see the evidence of it and did try to help, but there was far too few of them that were willing to do anything else. And especially because in the immediate aftermath, of course, news media, because it hit the New York Times, so now it's everywhere, everyone was talking about it. So they went and stuck a microphone in the face of all these generals, and they would say stuff like, well, yeah, I saw the Davis report. That's his perspective. That's what it is, but he doesn't see all I see. And from where we see, this is from the Commander General Scaparrotti at the time. He said, from where I see, that the things are still working in the right direction. Petraeus is right. Over time, you'll see this is going to work out. And so most of the major media went, okay. Congress continued to fund the money year after year after year until finally, by 2021 in August, spin was finally crushed by reality on the ground, as me and several others said that it would. And it was self-evident if you're willing to look at it realistically, you knew that outcome was going to happen. And because you had seen the fragility of the Afghan government, you've seen the incapacity of the Afghan military, despite all the billions of dollars we put in there to try to build them up to be a self-sustaining group, which was allegedly always the case, they fell apart and it finally collapsed. Well, naturally, who's the major media going to go to find out what happened and what the reasons were? Then the very architects for it. They blamed everybody else but themselves, as this interview from 2021, David Petraeus answering that question.
Certainly there was a sustained commitment that could have been pursued. 3,500 troops with a lot of drones and a lot of air power and 8,500 coalition forces, and perhaps most importantly, the contractors still on the ground.
We just should have stayed there forever. We should never have left. And if we had just continued to do that, then this wouldn't have happened. But you know what? That itself is a lie. It's dead wrong. And you don't need to look any further for proof of that fact. Then you look at what we did from that surge that David Petraeus promised President Obama it would work, all the way through to the end, where we had this big surge of troops. We killed a lot of Taliban. The Taliban grew. They got stronger and they got stronger. And then when finally, for political reasons, Obama withdrew anyway, the numbers kept going up. So every time we kept bombing them and all and killing them and having these strikes and drone strikes, attacks that he was just talking about here. And then at the end, we had, he was talking about 3,500 troops and some contractors. That's a drop in the bucket. I was there when there were 140,000 U.S. and NATO troops. And even then, we could not quell it. And they continued to grow. So the idea is laughable that 3,500 troops sitting basically in Kabul and Kandahar and Bagram Air Base are going to have any influence over the whole country, whether it's the Taliban or ISIS that was already on the process of coming up at that time. So they rose even when we had troops on the ground. We never had enough with those 3,500 to contain them. They will fight tooth and nail to keep the troops there. That's the Middle East.